Now, in last video for the Rotel tuner amplifier, I mentioned, because I had to demonstrate the use of the phono input, that my turntable needed a bit of work and wondered if I'd ever get around to it. And of course the best time to get around to it is when you reminded yourself about it, so I thought I'd have a look. This is a dual CS505. Nowadays it will be referred to as a 505 Mark 1. Although in those days it was just called the 505 because they didn't have any newer ones at that point. And it was produced around 1981, lasted about 2 or 3 years, and then they went up to the 505 2, 3 and 4, and a 505 4 I think was still made up until about 5 years ago. Quite a long production run of these turntables really, and various things changed over the years. This one, as I said, one of the earliest, but was generally very well regarded. Cost was about 80 quid back in the day, which is equivalent to about 280 now, I think, which made it a very budget turntable. But as I said, it had quite a good reputation. I think it was probably 82 or 83 when I got this one. Now, as you can see, it's lived a life that's full, travelled each and every byway, churning out Fleetwood Mac and Steely Dan from student halls through bedsit land and semi-detached suburbia, and landed up still here with me now. And I don't ever really want to get rid of it. I've got rid of far too much stuff that I've had to go around recollecting again. And I do like it. As you can see, I've taken the cartridge out because I don't want to damage it while working on it, but I will show you it. So these things had a rather fiddly cartridge holding bit which clips on with this little thing here. So you put it in there and then with that backwards, and you push that and it holds it in. And then there's a little grub screw which is long lost, which holds it in place. You really need to have that, because if you're not careful and you don't have that, what happens is you accidentally knock that and your cartridge falls out, which you don't want to damage the stylus. This is using a Nagaoka MP110. I previously had MP10s on it, Stanton 681s. And I think originally it came with an Autophon cartridge, I seem to remember. But I quite like this one. This is fairly new. As I said, the MP10 was the one I used on it for quite a long time, or maybe the MP11, I can't remember. The other things that tend to happen with this, you can see there's a little thing here on the rest which is supposed to flip over and hold this down, but it doesn't, because those always break off. I've never seen one of these in recent years with that fitted. It's a plastic body shell, metal chassis of course, with the usual suspension springs so that you can walk past it in size 9s and not cause this thing to skip about and jump off the record. 10-inch platter, which is a bit low rent really, even for the time. I think later ones did move up to a 12-inch platter, so the LP doesn't overlap it like it does on this one. Also later ones changed the suspension and arm a little bit, and also went over to having a wooden plinth, so they looked a bit better. Actually, it worked for a while in the 1980s for a company in Chapel St Peter that were the importers of the whole dual range, and I could have obtained a new one on discount then, but I didn't, because this one was okay for me. I really should have done that, but I did obtain possibly one or two on discount for friends, which of course you're not supposed to do. Nevertheless, they can't find me now, can they? And also, they've gone out of business, so they can't sue me. The fact that I work for them and the fact that they've gone out of business, the two things are not connected, by the way. Anyhow, it's got the usual facilities.
Well, as you can see, it's got all the speeds. It's got 33 and 45.
Yes, what do I do with my old 78s?
What do you say?
Nothing.
Little pitch variation here, so you can tweak it a little bit, not very much either way, to get a bit of variation. The strobe things around the side, which don't work very well now because of LED lights, but if you got the old incandescent or fluorescent lights, you'll be able to use that to get your speed right on it. It's got a semi-automatic transport, so what happens is you push it in, and I ought to try and demonstrate this, but one of the things that is an issue with it is that it doesn't always power up properly. So I'm going to plug it in and see if it starts. Actually, it started there. That's pretty good, isn't it? It doesn't always, and this is one of the things I need to look at. At least it wasn't starting reliably until a few days ago, when I started using it to look at the Rotel, and since I used it a few times, it seems to have become a bit more reliable at starting up. Perhaps that's the answer. You shouldn't leave it standing. It's probably just a dirty switch or something, so we can have a look at that. What other things are an issue? Well, I do occasionally lose one channel on the cartridge head shell interface, so that I think needs a little bit of cleaning up. I'm not sure whether it's this side or the carrier side. I had a problem with it a few years ago when I got it out of very long-term storage, and the problem there was that it would run, but it sometimes ran backwards. And the reason for this is that it uses a synchronous AC motor, because a synchronous motor will run either way. Once it's given a start, it will run in either direction. The capacitor's there to provide a little bit of phase shift to push it in the right direction when it starts up. If that capacitor goes wrong, gets shorted out or open circuit or whatever, then it may not start at all, or it might just randomly start and go in the wrong direction. So people sell little kits of the capacitors and resistor on eBay, and you can get those and replace them. I think I've got some spares for that, because I got 2 of those kits a while ago at the time that I had to replace the first one. What else is there to look at? It's not quite standard in terms of the audio leads. Now, it has captive audio leads. There's no sockets on the back. We had captive audio leads. These are not the originals. I added these in, and I use this Canford HSS cable because it was quite low noise, which, you know, is generally good. You get a lot less hum from this cable than you got from the ones that came with it. The ones that came with it actually were okay, but they were not brilliant, and possibly got damaged over the years, so I use this stuff. The only issue I think I'm having with this is that the capacitance is a bit high, so I think it's knocked off some of the top end response. I'm just going to measure the capacitance of this lead here. Of course the cartridge isn't in, so we aren't looking at the, you know, we're not being distracted by that. And if I put that on there, it's, I can see that that's nanofarads we're reading there, so 300 picofarads, which is a little bit high, and with a 47k, I think it's supposed to be 47k impedance, that will give you a turnover frequency of, calculation coming up on screen, but around 11 or 12k. And of course you've got to take into account the capacitance of the phono input stage as well, which would be in parallel with that, so it'd be nice to have a lower capacitance if possible, although I don't know whether I've got any cable that meets both those criteria of lower noise and low capacitance. But we can have a go at it and try rewiring it. So I was wondering what other sorts of cable I might use instead of the HSS because of its high capacitance. I thought first of all I'd have a look at this stuff, which I've got loads and loads of, which is what I tend to use for making audio interconnects, and it seems to be okay. But if we measure the capacitance of that with about the same length, I'm surprised to find it's pretty much exactly the same capacitance as the HSS, and I don't think it's going to be lower noise either, so that seems to be out. So I came up with, I got some of this Musiflex stuff around. This is a cable type that I don't think you can really get anymore. I don't think it's sold new anymore anyway. I think the company's gone out of business, but I've got some of it left. If I take a meter of this and measure the capacitance of it, we get 140, which is a lot less. It's sort of around half of what we were getting from the HSS. Should be the same on both cores. I'm only going to use one core. Obviously if I use both cores together, that wouldn't be any good. It'd go back to double again, but I only need to use one core. This is dual core here because it's meant for balanced things like mic connections for XLRs and things, and that's not what we're using it for in this case. So if I use one core of this, that should be okay. It is bright blue. I do have some other lengths of it, or I have another length of it, but that is bright orange. Of the two I decided the bright blue was probably the lesser of two evils, so I'm going to use this. Now there's another question here, which is with my ancient ears, will I actually be able to tell the difference between the two once I've changed it over, or will I just use confirmation bias to convince myself that because I've spent some time and effort on it that actually it must be better? And obviously that's not the best way to go about it. So what I decided I'd do is a bit of spectrum analysis on what the thing is like before and after. And to test this, I've decided to use the old Rush album Permanent Waves, and the first track from that, which is Spirit of Radio, very appropriate for this channel. This is a very old recording, obviously, from... When did it come out? Yeah, 1980. I remember actually going to see Rush in the Queen's Hall in Leeds in that year. That's another thing that's not there anymore. Now obviously we can't play too much of this because of copyright issues, but what I'll do is I'll show you how I'm monitoring it on the PC scope and we can see what we're doing. So what I did was let that run for the whole track and then see what we ended up with. It's recording the peak level of, you know, each frequency bucket across the time that it's been recording for. And I also, as a reference, took a copy of the CD. Now I have this on CD, but it's in the loft, but I have ripped all my CDs that I don't use very often, and they're all on MP3s, and I know people are going to whinge about MP3s not being the same, but it's still going to be pretty good quality, and certainly for this sort of measurement. And as you can see, this is what we get if we play the ripped CD version. If I compare that with what we got with the current vinyl version here, you can see that there is more of a drop off. If I try and put the two together, you can see it drops off a bit more at the high frequencies with the vinyl version, but you can generally see they're in the mid-range, which always dominates. They're pretty much the same. The low frequency here, you don't see anything on the CD one. On the vinyl one, you do get this bump at the low frequencies, but that's because of the rumble from the rotating platter, which is not an issue with a CD. So that's what we're starting with. I'm hoping that if I change the cables, this will lift up a bit when I do it again. If it doesn't, I will indeed have wasted my time, but that's not a first for this channel, is it? Now getting to the part is fairly straightforward actually. I've taken the cartridge out, and first thing you need to do is remove this rubber mat here, and then there's a little twisty thing which unlocks. So we take that out, unlocks the platter, or so they say. There you go. So you can now see the top part of the mechanism. When I retrieved it years ago, I replaced the two belts, and this is the main drive belt here, so that's new, or relatively new. There's also another belt here which drives the variable pitch, but oddly enough I'm not sure that's actually working. I can turn that round, but I can't see anything moving with it, so maybe we need to have a look at that. Anyway, to get the mechanism out completely, what you have to do is a bit of a dance with these transit screws. So what you do is get them loose like that, and then push it towards the edge, which then removes it from the captive bit, and then you can lift it. But you have to then do the same with this one, pushing it towards that edge, and hopefully they both come out at around the same time. Yeah, so that then gives you the ability to pull the thing out. I'm not going to be able to do that because the camera's in the way, but we'll come back with it in the right place. Now, one of the first things we get by taking it apart is the ability to date it, because here it's got these little date stamp things on the case. So it looks like it was manufactured on the 25th of April 1982. So I was probably right guessing that I bought it in 1982. These aren't particularly easy to work on. These things are very tight going into the grommets at the back. There isn't a lot of room to pull it apart. The audio joins onto the wires from the pickup arm here under this cover. I'm not sure what that cover does. I suppose it provides some sort of screening, but I'm not sure how much effect it actually has. It's a fair way from the motor, which is right over here. So this is the motor assembly on a floaty bit here, and then under here is the control stuff. Let's just have a quick look at that actually. We have this micro switch which is operated by the mechanism pulling the arm towards the record, and I think, yeah, it's possible I just need to clean that up a bit. It seems, as I said, it seems more reliable now. It's a bit floaty, and I suppose it can get out of in a state where it doesn't quite close, so we'll clean that up a bit. There's actually the tiniest ever circuit diagram on here which shows you how this unit is wired. But essentially there's a capacitor across the switch, which is here, which is just a quenching, stop it sparking when the switch is operated. There's also an inductor in series with the mains. So that bit is a switching bit. I've never quite understood this. There's two capacitors here for the phase shift, but when you look at the diagram it only shows one capacitor, and the drawing that comes with the manual has got a sort of dotted line for one of them, so it needs both. This is the phase shifting bit, first of all so that it rotates at all when it starts up, and secondly so it doesn't rotate the wrong way. And this big resistor here is in series with the mains supply for 240 volt models. 110 volt models, that resistor isn't in circuit and doesn't overheat therefore. So if one of these capacitors goes short, then that resistor gets a lot of current through it and gets very hot, and that's what happened to this one. So as I said, people sell the kit of bits on eBay so you can replace them all in one go. So I'll give that switch a clean, and then I'll take a look over here at redoing the audio connections. Now the problem with the thing not always switching on is down to this micro switch here not completely engaging, as it turns out. It's nothing to do with it being dirty as I thought. So if I move the tone arm, you can see this comes in and pushes that. At the moment it's pushing it the right amount, but what sometimes happens is that it sort of sticks there on this plastic thing and doesn't go right to the end there, which is what it should do in order to depress that fully. I think that's because the grease has dried up, so I'm going to re-grease that and see if it improves things. Right, the connecting leads have been replaced. It's time now for the moment of truth. Now I've got to admit, I'm not absolutely certain I can hear a massive difference in the top end having changed the leads. I think I possibly can, but again there may be a bit of my wanting to believe that, and the only thing we can do is look at the charts. So here again is the reference, which is a CD rip, and I'm just going to look at frequencies of 100 Hz, 1 kHz, 6 kHz and 12.5 kHz, which is a reasonable selection of things up the range, and you're really not going to get much more than 12.5 kHz out of a record player of this quality anyway. So that's a quick whiz through the results then, and here they are all tabulated. And what I've done, because they're all slightly different levels when I recorded them, I've normalised them all to 1 kHz, and that's what you can see in the second column on it under each thing. And obviously the CD rip is much better at the top end than the others. It's like 9 dB difference there. It's only down to -25 there, whereas the others are around 30s. And you can also see that there's almost no difference at the base end, which is not entirely surprising. I'd be disappointed if there were. There's a very tiny difference of, what, 1 dB, something like that, less than 1 dB at 6 kHz, and 2.53-ish at 12.5. I'm not sure how much the points of dBs mean here, and I don't think we've got massively accurate measurements here. Looking at that, I think that I'm fooling myself if I say that I can hear the difference between one and the other. Knowing what I do about my hearing at my current age, I don't think I'm capable of noticing a 3 dB difference at 12.5 kHz. But I do think that a younger person would see it, so I think we have made an improvement there. Was it worth it? Well, obviously it's worth it because somebody else who's younger than me may use a turntable in the future. And let's face it, vinyl's probably the only old medium which is going to still be around in 20 years' time, isn't it? Of course, there's always potential for new generations of hipsters buying overpriced rubbish. Now, I ought to point out here that I'm not aligning myself with the audiophile idiot fraternity here, saying that the cable has to be made from copper mined from a specific place in Africa and your house has to be rotated to match magnetic north. All of that is total bullshit. I'm not suggesting that you should go down that route. However, there are basic electrical things like capacitance and resistance that you can take account of when you look at cabling things, and you can make a difference. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise. I always say that at the end of videos anyway, don't I? Anyway, see you on the next one.